Okay, so if you watched the previous video, you have your notebook all set up and it looks like this. We talked about numeric expressions are math sentences that have just numbers and operations. Algebraic expressions are math sentences that include numbers, variables, which are really just those letters that we talked about, and then operations. And then we talked about the parts of an algebraic expression. So you want to make sure that you have all of this in your notebook before we move on. So now we're going to talk just a little bit about, we're going to do some examples. So the first example I want you to copy down looks like this. It says 9c plus 5d minus 2. And then we're going to talk about what we see in this example. I see 3 terms. So in this example, there's 1, 2, 3 terms. I see a constant. Here is my constant. So I'm going to write that there's 1 constant. I see 2 different coefficients. There's a 9 that's attached to the c, which means 9 times c. It doesn't mean 90 something. And I see a 5, which doesn't mean 50 something. It means 5 times whatever d is. So there are 2 coefficients. And if it helps, you can write them out here if you want to. The 1 constant is 2. The 2 coefficients are 9 and 5. It's up to you. Now, I also see there are some variables. So I see a C and I see a D. So there are 2 variables. And then if you want to go through the operations, you can. There's an obvious plus symbol and a subtraction symbol. Don't forget, though, that there is multiplication. It's not the multiplication symbol. It's just there because this is what we're doing. We're doing 9 times C and 5 times D. So there are some operations in there as well. The second example I want you to write is going to look like this. Now, while you're writing that, I want you to notice that this little dot means multiplication. There's a reason that I did not write an X symbol for multiplication, and that's because if I had written an X, then you might have been confused and thought that I meant an X as in a variable X. So we have to make sure that we're very careful when we're working with algebra that we don't use the multiplication symbol any longer, that we go with the dot, or that you use parentheses. So just like we did before, we're going to talk about what do we see. In this one, I see 1, 2, 3 terms. So we're going to write that in there, 3 terms. In this one, we also just have 1 constant. I also see that we have a couple of coefficients this time. I have a 3 that goes with my x squared, and I have a 3 that goes with my x. Now, even though those are the same number, we can actually say we've got 2 coefficients because this x squared and this x are not the same. We're going to talk about what those are called in just a second. And then we do have some variables. We have 2 different variables, which is kind of confusing because one of them is x with an exponent of 2 and one of them is just x. Those are 2 totally different things, because if x were 3, then this would just be 3, but this would be 3 times 3 because it's 3 with an exponent of 2. So once you've got this written down, then I want us to just kind of flash forward for just a second and talk about like terms, because you are going to need to understand what this means. Now, we said a term is the combination of a coefficient with a variable, or a coefficient with a variable and an exponent, or just a constant all by itself. So like terms, we have to make sure that you understand this, are terms with the same variables and powers, meaning exponents. So if you need to write exponents in parentheses, do it. Coefficients don't matter. So I'll let you write that down. Now here are some examples. If I have 3a and 5a, those are considered like terms. Even though one has a 3 and one has a 5, I want you to notice that both of them have a variable of a. Another example is 2x with an exponent of 2 and 12x with an exponent of 2. These are called like terms because even though they have two different coefficients, their variables are both an x and they both have an exponent of 2 connected to that variable. Let's take a look at one more. What about 5c and 8c with an exponent of 2? This is kind of confusing. These are actually unlike terms. And there's a reason for this. It's not because one has a 5 and one has an 8. It's because this one has a variable of c all by itself, and this one has a variable of c squared, or c with an exponent of 2. So that means these are unlike terms, and those cannot be worked with together because they don't have the same variable. So this is all you're going to enter onto this page of your notebook. You want to make sure that you have put this into your notebook in its entirety. Check your haiku page. It will tell you what page this is in your notebook. And then the very next video is going to show you what you're going to do next. Thanks.